We used to go swimming, just take a bus, go down to Lady Hill swimming baths and go swimming, or Forest Hill swimming baths. We also used to play what we call Knockdown Ginger, which was an outside game that you'd get about 5 or 6 friends. You'd all pick doors to knock on without the neighbours knowing, and then run away before the neighbour could open the door. We also used to play run-outs, which was another game where you would have a timer and you'd have to run around, basically block, and then get back there before the timer went off, which was run-outs. Swimming, we just used to go swimming and muck about in the swimming pool, jump about, play. Couldn't swim at the time, but I soon learned after that. Socialising, it was basically, we used to go to, it's called Under 16s Club, and that was in Forest Hill as well. And that was between 5 in the afternoon till 7, I think it was. And we used to just go there, play pool, play games, have a drink, have a snack, talk to each other, and then that was it, time for home, and we'd go home and have dinner.
What about music and TV and films? Were you into music? What sort of artists?
I'd say the music-wise, I suppose our main music was radio, so I used to listen to a lot of pirate radio stations. But on the telly, it was Top of the Pops, which is kind of out of date now. But Top of the Pops was one of the best things we'd watch on a Friday afternoon and Friday evening. We'd make sure we'd get in front of the telly at about, I think it was 5:30 or 6 o'clock it used to start, and we wouldn't move until it finished. And it was just, Wham would be on the radio, and Duran Duran would be on Top of the Pops, and Eddie Grant and Bob Marley and Dennis Brown. There was so much other acts that were on the Top of the Pops. That was the only way we could actually access proper music, which was through Top of the Pops. But then on a Saturday, my mother used to give me and my sister about £1.50 each, and we used to go down to the Lewisham precinct where there was a record shop, and we used to buy our 7-inch records for 75p. And the 12-inch records were for about £1.50 to £2.50. So, yeah, that was our entertainment with music.
Fantastic. Now, housing. Our next section is about housing. Can you tell me what area you lived in, what type of house or flat it was, and anything you can remember about descriptions about those?
I lived in Sydenham, and it was an estate in the middle of Sydenham. There was a lot of greenery around it, and there was a local park down the road, so we used to go to the local park quite a lot. But on the estate, where the community base, we could go out and play till maybe 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, and no one would worry about us, because everybody, all the children from the estate knew each other, and we all used to socialise together. There was a part of the estate called a square, and it literally was a concrete square. But in there, we used to play like the football and the jump about and dance, and that was the meeting place, I suppose, for the whole estate. And then once everybody met there, then we'd just go off and do, the older ones would walk up to the woods maybe, the younger ones would walk down to the park, the ones in between would maybe be on their bikes or the roller skates and going up and down the estate. But it was safe in the respect that there was no outside people that would come onto the estate. It was everybody that we knew that lived on the estate. So it didn't matter what time we was out there, everybody was together on the estate, and we all looked out for each other. Which was nice.
What about your actual, where you lived itself, the building? Was it a house, a flat?
It was a 3-bedroom flat on the second floor of a very small block. It is a top floor of a small block. In the block had about 9 other flats in there, and it was basically all families in there. So I remember my mum had 4 children. Our next door neighbour had 4 children. The lady 2 floors underneath us had 4 children. The lady to the left of us had 4 children. So when we all went out to play, it was about 20 strong of us all out of one block, one literally block to go and play. And it was lovely. It was lovely. And we'd all go out together and we'd all come home together. And our parents would stand on the balcony and watch us play, or sit and have cups of tea together. It was nice. Nice community.
Now, the next section is about jobs or unemployment. Did you have a job in the 80s? Were you old enough to have a job? If you did, what job was it? Did your parents have trouble finding work? And just what was the general employment situation that you remember?
My mum was a stay-at-home mum until I was 15. I've got older sisters and brothers, but she stayed at home until I was 15, and then she went out to work. And my mother worked in an old people's home, and she still works there now. And she looked after the old people. At the time, it was part-time. So she used to set us off to school in the morning. She had to get herself to work for 10, and then she'd finish about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And then on my return home, she would be at home waiting for me. So at 3:30, 4 o'clock, Mum would be back at home then, as she was working. When I turned 14, my first job was in a play centre, a play scheme in Honor Oak, Turnham. We're quite famous at the moment. And I used to look after the under fives. I worked with children and volunteered and looked after under fives. So I had all little children running around when I was about 14, 15. I also did a Saturday job, and it was in a clothes shop in Peckham, on Peckham High Street. It was called Just for Kids. It was a clothes shop called Just for Kids. And I worked in there on Saturday mornings until about 5 o'clock in the afternoon and just serving customers. That was it. Employment was hard, I suppose, but if you had a job, you stayed in the job. You didn't come out of that job, you stayed in that job, which is why my mother's still in the same job now, because she didn't stop the job, she just continued.
Brilliant. Our next section is about the riots in 1981 and 1985. What are your memories of either of those riots?
My memories were anger, I suppose, and a bit of upset, I think, because as a young person, it just felt like I was being victimised, or the people around me, my community, was being victimised because of our colour. The riots, I think, in 85 were the Brixton riots, and that was because a black person was shot in police custody or died in police custody, and it was just an uproar. So I felt kind of victimised because I didn't know if I could go out and be myself, because there was black people being killed in police custody when it came to authority. So it was a bit frightening. On the other hand as well, it didn't stop us from going out and doing what we needed to do. We still went out, we still played. I ended up going to college in Brixton when I was 18. So even the area didn't frighten me away in a way. It just made me feel a bit more together with the community, because it was from Brixton and it was in the area that this guy had died in police custody, and the uprising that happened after that. So I just felt kind of close to Brixton as a black person because of what was going on in the area.
Did you feel scared?
I wasn't scared in Brixton itself, no. But on the night of the riots, then yes, I was. I was scared for my other black people, if that makes sense. We could see it unfolding, we could see it on the news, we could hear about it. I had older sisters as well, so they were talking about it quite a lot. So I was really scared on the nights of the riots when we saw it unfolding. I was scared, but I wasn't scared because I thought I was going to be involved in it. I was just scared for the other black people that were involved in it, because it was just frightening.
Do you think that the riots changed anything?
I think it helped to break down some barriers where it should have helped to build the barriers. Why I say that is, at the time, the confidence towards the police was not high. And that helped to break it even more, because black people didn't have confidence in the police because of what happened. A black guy died in police custody. Because of that, we didn't have the comfortability, I suppose, or security around the police themselves. Community-wise, I felt it did bring us together. It made all black people kind of realise that we are together, we have to fight this together. And it could be you today, it could be you tomorrow, it could be somebody else today, it could be somebody else tomorrow. So it kind of made you a bit more aware of your blackness, I think, and to hold on to your blackness and be happy and appreciative of when you saw another black person. It was, I think it brought us together in a way, but also brought us down.
Do you remember when Cherry Gross was shot?
Yeah.
What are your memories of that?
I cried my eyes out because it was the thought of Cherry Gross was an older black person, and as an 80's baby, I suppose, or a 70's baby, we are taught to respect our elders. Unless Cherry Gross was an elder, it was hard to know that the police had actually stormed into an elder person's house and she was shot dead. It was frightening, it was upsetting, and it made me think about my own mum at the time. Do you know what I mean? Going in, it could have happened to anyone. It could have been anybody's house that they'd walked into for that reason, because it was a wrongful arrest and it was a wrongful reasons why they went there. It could have been any one of our houses. So it was scary in that way. It was.
What are your thoughts comparing and contrasting the riots in the 80's to the more recent 2011 riots?
When it was in the 80's, the riots were, to me, it felt like it was for a purpose. It was to stand up, it was a cause to protest against the wrongfulness that was happening in the police force with the black community. But as I've grown up in the 2011, even though the same reasons were there, they wanted to protest against the wrongful stuff that had happened to black people, it ended up being totally wrong by looting and breaking down innocent people's homes and crashing up cars that didn't need to be, people's property was damaged, and I don't think that was the right way to go about it. So in that respect, it was more frightening, I suppose, in 2011, because it wasn't just one area, it was all areas in South East London that was in uproar, not just South East London, all over the country, in uproar, and that was frightening, because no matter what area you came from or what area you went into, it was happening. There was looting, there was shouting, there was screaming, there was people protesting on the road. It was worrying. I was scared.
Do you, and sort of more generally, how would you compare the 1980s to now, to the last decade? What are the similarities? What are the differences?
I think it feels a bit more angrier now. It feels a bit more tense now than it did back then when it came to the protesting and rioting. I think it feels a bit more intense now because it's still happening and it shouldn't still be happening. So I think a lot of the young people in this country have had lived through the 1980s, and now they're coming into 2011 and it's still happening. Some of the black people are being killed or wrongfully arrested, or maimed or whatever else it is for the wrong reasons. And I think it's just a bit more intense now. More angry and more intense, I feel now.
Stephen, Sam, have you got, off the back of what Ms. Best said, have you got any questions that you want to ask? Have they put any thoughts in your brain?
What do you think about 2017 and how, do you think the racism has stopped? Or do you think it's still going on?
I think racism won't ever stop. I really don't believe it will ever stop. As long as there are different cultures clashing, I don't think the racism will stop. I just think we need to be more tolerant about it. So I do think the racism is still there. The same racism that may have happened back in the 90s are still prevalent now, but in a different form. In that respect, I suppose, black people are more widely accepted, but in certain areas were not widely accepted, and that's what makes me sad, because we should be accepted everywhere. Just because we're black, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be accepted anywhere else. I do think a lot of the some politics have a lot to do with the racism towards a certain group, I suppose, and at the moment I can talk from black people. So I do think some politics have triggered certain feelings towards black people where it doesn't need to. That doesn't need to happen. And I think that's a negative rather than a positive.
In the 80s, did you experience racism as a young person?
Yeah. On a daily basis, yeah.
What was the...
On a bus every day, you'd get people moving. If you was a black person, a young black girl getting on the bus, you'd get people not wanting to sit next to you because you was black. didn't understand it too much. In shops, there was always a rule of only 2 school children in a shop at a time, but in certain areas, it was more because you was black, you wasn't allowed in that school, in that shop. It was only had to go in there singularly. You couldn't go in there in groups. It had to be singularly. That I found that hard. I found my peers, which were in school, I found my peers quite racist. It was a lot of name calling, and a lot of, I say stabbing you in the back as such. It was a lot of talking to you in your face today, but tomorrow they're going to be black this, black that, black. It was horrible like that. So in school, every day, yes, I came across racism, and I did get in a couple of fights for it. There was a couple of boys that have got bruises on their bodies and scars on their bodies where I did fight, because I wasn't going to be called names and someone was going to just get away with it. It wasn't going to happen. And I suppose as a female, as a young girl, I had to fight back. I wasn't going to allow people to treat me like that, because me and my sisters, there's 4 girls in my family. So there is no I had big brothers, but they were much older than me. So growing up, it was just the 4 girls. And a lot of boys thought, white boys, other Caucasian boys, thought that they could actually take the mickey out of me and my sisters because we was all girls. So hence why there's a couple of white boys that I'm very good friends with now that I did beat up, and they have got scars all over their body from me. But after years, we are friends. We are friends. So I think it is swings and roundabouts. It's worked well.
What about sexism then? Do you think the attitude to women has changed between now and the 1980s?
I don't know if I can compare that. I didn't feel in a way that as a woman I was inhibited anyway in the 80s. I didn't feel that at all. I could do whatever I wanted to do. But as I've grown up older now, I find I do come across that ceiling. I do come across, as a woman, you can't do certain things, or it's perceived that you can't do certain things because you're a woman. So when I was younger, I don't think it hit me as much as it has now. I think now I'm more aware of it.
Have some of your friends died?
Yes. But it depends on what reasons you're asking if they've died.
Race.
Yes. Some of them have been killed because they've been black. I think, it's not been proven, but I think, yes, they've been killed because they were black. Can I talk about, also in the 80s, there was a thing called the New Cross Fire. And a couple of my friends and my cousins were in the New Cross Fire. And basically, it was a fire in South East London, on New Cross Road. And again, in the 80s and the 90s, black people used to get together in the houses. We used to have parties, and it was for a 16th birthday party. I think she was 16. It was 16th birthday party in New Cross. And my older sisters had gone there, some of my cousins. And what had come out of it that night that we didn't realise is when my sisters and my cousins had left the party, there was an argument. They presume there was an argument, and they think there was a racist guy that had threw a bottle, a firebomb or something into the top window of the house of the party. Now there was hundreds of ravers in this house, and they threw the firebomb or a fireball into the house, and that's what caused the fire. And a lot of people were killed in that fire. A lot of people were burnt. A lot of people have mental scars, and they still have physical scars today. And yeah, that was frightening. And again, that had to do with race. It was just somebody celebrating a birthday. And because I think somebody didn't like the fact that there was loud music on the corner of New Cross, where there was a large gathering of black people, they had apparently asked them to turn down the music. It was a bit of a noise disturbance. They had apparently asked them the neighbours had asked the parents to turn down the music, and the parents had said, it's okay, it's not that loud. The police have already been around, which I had been around in the area, and they had said it wasn't that loud. But there was other people who didn't like the fact that black people were congregating and meeting in one place and enjoying themselves. And I think that was part of a racism, why the New Cross Fire happened.
I think that's from the other interviews we've done, that's one of the reasons that kicked off the 1981 riots as well, wasn't it? Yeah.
But then there was a lot of protests with that. And there was a lot of marches with that. And those marches were for the right reasons. But then after that, it felt like, again, black people were victimised because there was a group of people marching for the right reason. Why are you killing our people? Why are you killing us? Why are you doing that? Because black people are enjoying themselves or celebrating somebody's life, turned 16. It's a good thing. There was a lot of marches, and from the marches, there came riots because some of the police didn't want us to walk through. It was a national front at the time, which was called the NF, which was another political party. They didn't like black people. They were very racist, very, very racist. And they themselves did not want black people walking through certain areas. So that's how some of the riots in the 80s came about. Because the black people were marching through certain areas that were predominantly white, the National Front didn't want that, and they came out and started fighting, and then it became a riot. So that's my take on it. I'm not saying it's 100% true. That's me living through it and understanding it at the time. That's how I lived through it.
Any other sort of general, if I was just to say to you, what is your sort of overall view of the 80s? How would you sum up that decade?
Fun. Disco. Bright colours. The fashion was really leery, bright colours. The music was very up-tempo. It was a time of aspiration, I think. I found it was very, aspiring to me as a young person growing up. The 80s aspired me on to bigger and better things, and I think quite a lot of my colleagues, my peers, we all try to aspire to bigger and better things and to stay true to yourself, I think, because there was so much conflict. You felt like you couldn't be the black person you wanted to be because that was wrong. But I think the 80s ground into us that we could be the black people that we wanted to be because we were right. It wasn't wrong to be black. So just aspirational.
Do you think it teaches you a lesson?
Every life is a lesson, yeah. Everything in life is a lesson. So I think it did it taught me a good lesson. To be proud of my complexion, of who I am. It taught me a good lesson.